Okay, thank you. Good evening and welcome to the meeting of the Horsham Planning Committee. Horsham Planning Committee, I'm Councillor Ellis Brown. I will be chairing the meeting this evening. I will be chairing all the meeting this evening, but with the exception of item 6 on the agenda of the meeting. I shall be supported by the Vice Chair, Councillor John Trollope, who will be chairing agenda item 6 because agenda item 6 is in my ward. And we will be supported by the professional officers. Thank you for attending, and may I remind members of the public, this is not a forum for the public to ask questions or challenge the points raised during the debate by officers or members of the committee. You must not engage with members or call out during the debate. If you're requested to speak, when invited to do so, it's important that you keep your allotted time. This will be monitored, and myself or the Vice Chair will prompt you to conclude your comments as we approach the end of your allotted time. Your comments and discussion points must be relevant to the application the committee is considering. We are not expecting a fire drill this evening, so should you hear the alarm, please make your way to the nearest fire exit, which is in the rear of the chamber, and we meet outside the Ling Cross Public House. May I ask council members and members of the public to switch off mobile phones and other electronic devices or switch them to silent. When speaking, members, please remember to turn your microphone on and to turn it off when you are finished. The same with public who are speaking. You'll be invited to sit at the table over there, and before you speak, please turn on the microphone, and when you've concluded your comments, please turn it off. Members, when you are voting, please make sure your arm is clearly raised so that we can accurately capture the votes. I also remind members on the committee you cannot vote on applications within your ward. I'd also ask everyone here this evening to show respect to each other throughout the meeting, as this is being live streamed. Please refrain from any personal comments relating to officers and members of the committee. Before we proceed, could officers here this evening please introduce themselves, starting with the officers on my right.
Robert Hermitage, Principal Planning Officer.
It's Matthew Porter, Planning Officer.
Emma Parks, the Head of Development. Claire Brown, Principal Planning Solicitor.
And Liz Fennick, Democratic Services Officer.
Thank you very much. Item number 1 on the agenda is apologies for absence and notification of substitute members. Do we have any apologies for absence, and are there any substitute members?
Yes, we've received apologies from Councillor Peter Vanderborg, Councillor John Campbell, Nigel Emery, Anthony Frankland and Dennis Livingstone, and we have got Councillor Jill Perry substituting, and we have also got, we're expecting Councillor Hannah Butler, who is running a little late, but she will also be a sub this evening. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Declaration of members' interest. Oh, sorry, apologies. Minutes. Do members consider them to be an accurate reflection of the meeting held on the 21st of July this year? Yes?
Yes.
Okay, agreed?
Agreed.
Thank you. Declaration of members' interest. Are there any declarations of interest from members of the committee? No. The exception here is agenda item 6 is in my ward, but I have no interests other than it's in my ward, and this will be dealt with by the Vice Chair. It will be chaired by the Vice Chair. Announcements from the Chair. Well, no announcements from me or the Chief Executive, so we'll deal with the first application this evening, which is item number 5, land to the south of Broadbridge Way, Broadbridge Heath. Could the officer please make the presentation to committee?
Hi, good evening, members. So since publication of the committee report, updates are reported as follows. Firstly, 3 representations in further objection are received, summarised as raising the following. A very substantial change being handled in a non-transparent nor proper procedure, plus safety and suitability of access via Carter Drive, which should remain closed to normal traffic. Secondly, a revised National Planning Policy Framework has been issued. Its policy content for consideration of and decision making on the proposal is addressed in the published addendum. So this is a full plans application. The site is shown red on the slide, and it's for 92 new residential homes in Broadbridge Heath and includes access and related works. Members will be familiar with the site, photographs of which are now shown in their careful consideration of all the planning matters pertaining to the proposals in January this year, when it was resolved to approve the application. Members are also reminded of consistency in decision making is a well-established principle of the planning system. So viewable now is the site layout as proposed. The application returns to committee for members to consider the applicant's request that the legal agreement is worded to allow the opportunity for up to 100% affordable housing. For the reasons set out in the committee report, officers judged the proposal to be finely balanced, with the moderate weight afforded to the additionality potential to address evidenced acute need for affordable homes in the district, set against consideration of a loss of seal receipt where apportioned to identified local infrastructure projects in the council's IDP, and including the 25% to the parish for village centre investment. So your officer's weighted and balanced exercise outcome remains as reported in the committee and in the addendum, having regard to the new material planning consideration of the revised NPPF, and officers continue to recommend approval.
Okay, thank you very much. I'd like to invite the first public speaker this evening. That's Erica. Erica, please, thank you. Apologies, I may have mispronounced your surname. I do. And you have 3 minutes.
I am speaking today regarding the planning application. Let me be clear. I support the provision of affordable housing. We all recognize the need of homes that local people can afford. My concern is not with affordable housing itself, but the scale of the change now being proposed, and whether it's receiving the level of scrutiny that such a significant change needs. The development has already been changed few times since it was first presented. Residents have been asked on multiple occasions to review, amend the plans, and revise proposals. We are now being asked to consider another substantial change, 100% affordable housing. In my view, this is not a minor amendment. It represents a fundamental change to the nature, composition, occupation of the development previously assessed by residents, planning officers, and elected members. Before such a significant change is accepted, several important questions should be answered. Who will own and manage the homes? Who will tenure types to be provided? How many homes will be delivered as social rent, affordable rent, or share ownership? I'm also concerned about the process being followed. Residents should be given the opportunity to review the revised proposals, understand the supporting evidence, and provide meaningful feedback before any decision is made. Planning decisions should be advised on evidence, transparency, and proper public scrutiny. Furthermore, there are already concerns associated with this development, including traffic impacts, highway safety, drainage, and pressure on local infrastructure. I'm also concerned that a change this magnitude may be proposed through a Section 106 amendment than through a fresh revising planning application. Moving from approximately 37 affordable housing to 100% affordable housing is not a simple technical adjustment. It fundamentally alters the tenure profile and the occupancy characteristics of the scheme originally considered by this committee and by local residents. Such a substantial change will not be dealt with solely through amendments to a legal agreement. It should be accompanied by clear evidence, robust planning and assessment, and appropriate public consultation. Residents should have the opportunity to consider and comment on any proposals that materially change the development from the scheme that was originally presented and evaluated. Given the numbers of amendments that have been made to the scheme, I believe it's essential that Sussex Police and West Sussex Fire Rescue Services are asked to review the current road layout and assess the new agreement. Given the scale of the proposal change and the...
Excuse me, could you bring your comments to conclusion, please?
Yes, given the proposal, we ask today to the referral will be allowed proper assessment, consultation and scrutiny to take place before any decision is made. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I now invite Tracy Chaplin, please, and you have 3 minutes as well. Thank you.
Thank you. I'd like to echo some of the points of the previous speaker. However, there are some other issues that I would like to bring up, especially in regards to the introduction of the new MPPF today, which is just one of many changes that will happen over the course of the next 2 or 3 years to governance within Horsham and Broadbridge Heath and beyond in West Sussex and the whole country. So some of my points echo that particular area. I was unable to attend on the 6th of January and regretted that ever since, but I was not aware that there was still time to object. It was not clearly stated anywhere that I could find, and time being of the essence for most people who would have wanted to object, it would have been beneficial to have a clearer understanding, especially in light of these huge changes that are being posed. So I'm concerned as well about the potential of 100% affordable housing. And as a private tenant who lives on Sergeant Way, I realise fully the cost of renting. So believe me, it's very high and it's getting bigger and bigger as time progresses. But we also have to take in mind also the other areas that we've seen this year with climate and water structure, which are all under threat, and those need to be taken into effect, I believe. Also, when the consultation happened by Vistry 2 years ago, many of those residents came along and they were looking for houses to buy. And if they'd have known it was 100% affordable housing only, they may have objected at the time. So therefore, they should have a right to put their views across again. So I mentioned the other things that are going to happen in a short space of time. We're going to have the new local plan, Horsham District Council changes, local government reorganisation and strategic authority changes, all of which will change the goalposts, and nobody knows exactly what that will lead to. So how can we actually put in place things now that are going to be, have an effect later on, and they need to be fully scrutinised. The new planning framework has a huge effect on wildlife and the local environment. And if we don't know where the
You bring your comments to conclusion, please.
Okay, I just want to say biodiversity net gain. I noticed that isn't mentioned at the end of the document by the planning officer, and that really needs to be put in place immediately before people approve it, so local people can understand what is at stake on a cumulative level, not just within Broadbridge Heath.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Would like to invite Nick Mulcahy. And you have 3 minutes. Thank you.
Good afternoon. My name is Nick Mulcahy and I live at 48 Carter Drive, which is directly overlooking the planned development. I just want to speak briefly about 2 issues. Firstly, the lack of proper consultation on an evolving application, and secondly, the inconsistencies in the documentation now before the committee. So my objective is clear. I am asking for you to defer the application. To clarify, this is not a request to refuse affordable housing. It is a request for proper process, transparency and public scrutiny. First point, consultation. The scheme being presented today is not the same scheme that residents were consulted on, nor the one narrowly approved in January. Since then, the application has materially changed, including amendments to housing numbers, layout, the proportion of affordable housing, and these are not minor tweaks. They fundamentally alter the nature and the impact of the development. Residents have had no opportunity to review or comment on these changes. Before any decision is made, we need a clear list of every drawing or document revised since the 6th of January, whether materiality of each change was actually assessed, why no further consultation was carried out, and whether the WSCC highways were reconsulted. The highways point to me is especially important. The proposed Carter Drive access opposite our house, together with the potential closure of Sargent Way, will undoubtedly increase traffic through the Carter Drive area. Carter Drive is a residential road with limited pavement provision, blind corners, on-street parking and existing pedestrian safety concerns. My wife Andrea reported an accident near miss a number of years ago, and its existing safety concern for residents is definitely not suitable to become a rat run for additional development traffic. My request, therefore, is for clarity on basic procedural question. Is the committee being asked to approve the January scheme or this significantly amended scheme now before us? If the latter, then the application should be resubmitted because the residents were led to believe nothing would change after January's decision. While the August report states there have been no representations from residents, that was section 3, this is because we believe planning had been granted as per the January application. Second point, document inconsistencies. 2 examples identified by myself. I'm a planning application layman, but the number of dwellings now planned is unclear.
Sorry, could you bring your comments to conclusion, please?
It refers to 89, 92, 93. I just want a fully accurate assessment. To be clear, just to summarise, I do not object to affordable housing. My concern is the process. A major application that evolved substantially without public scrutiny, together with an access arrangement that raises real safety, suitability issues for existing residents, should be reconsidered and deferred.
Thank you. I'd now like to invite Charlotte Hanscom. And you have 3 minutes. Thank you.
Good evening. I'm Charlotte Hanscom from Vistry Homes. Following the committee's resolution to grant planning permission at the site in January of this year, Vistry have partnered with Hyde Housing Group, who are seeking to provide up to 100% affordable housing. As explained by your officers, we are therefore requesting that the wording in the Section 106 agreement is amended to state that a minimum 37% of the site is brought forward as affordable housing in order to allow Hyde access to grant funding. To support this, Hyde have prepared a memorandum of understanding setting out their aspiration to deliver 55 social rented homes and 37 shared ownership homes. Hyde Group are one of the biggest registered providers of affordable housing in the South East, currently owning and managing over 44,000 homes, including around 600 homes within Horsham district. Hyde are led by a not-for-profit charity with a remit to build truly affordable homes alongside their local authority partners, home builders and like-minded investors. At this site, no changes are proposed to the detailed design already seen by this committee in January this year. A tenure-blind approach will be maintained and all previously proposed M42 and 3 units will be retained. In this regard, over 68% of the proposed homes will be built to M42 standard, significantly more than the 40% requirement in the new NPPF published yesterday. Additionally, the Section 106 agreement will retain all previously agreed financial contributions, including contributions towards open space, highways works and sports and leisure. Members will be acutely aware of the difficult climate the house building industry is in, particularly in terms of delivering affordable housing. Further, there is a well-documented shortfall of affordable housing both nationally and locally. This is reflected in the new NPPF, which requires that proposals meet or exceed affordable housing requirements. Within this context, the delivery of up to 100% affordable housing by a committed registered provider should be considered positively. We therefore respectfully ask members to approve the proposed amendment. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I would now like to invite Jeff Clark of Broadbridge Heath Parish Council, and you have 5 minutes. Thank you.
Good evening. The Parish Council are frustrated at the situation we find ourselves in today. This application, having originally been heard in January this year, is now back at committee, presenting potential significant changes without, we believe, adequate notification and time to explore the implications and formally respond, particularly given we're in the middle of traditional summer holiday season. As far as we are aware, there's been no formal notification to the Parish Council by either Horsham District Council or Vistry Homes to advise of the potential changes, other than the republication of the planning application via the District Council planning portal. Indeed, the amended application is shown to have been presented to the District Council only on the 28th of July, just some 3 weeks ago. However, the assumption is that work on this scheme goes back some time, probably some months. We believe the key points raised in the original submission by Broadbridge Heath Parish Council objecting to the application still stand. However, and in addition, we make the following points in relation to this amended application. Firstly, traffic. The amended scheme does not appear to take into account the traffic flow changes that will occur with the now planned closure of one end of Sergeant Way. This will have a significant effect on traffic flow as modelled. And in addition, and to the great concern of local residents, is the effect on Carter Drive. There does not appear to have been any mitigating measures proposed since the original approval in January. The submitted transport assessment relies on standard peak time travel modelling. However, social housing developments exhibit distinct non-standard travel behaviours. Vehicle movements and trips are often distributed more evenly throughout the day, rather than strictly conforming to typical commuter type rush hours. Secondly, housing for local people. This should be specifically detailed by condition or within the Section 106 agreement as housing for people with a connection to the village of Broadbridge Heath, and potentially within a wider, perhaps, for example, 5-mile radius being given priority, including those for shared ownership. As whilst the Hyde Group prioritised local people for lower rent properties, it doesn't clearly state this for the shared ownership properties. Thirdly, loss of SIL funding. 100% affordable housing means that there is no money available for the Parish Council to mitigate the impacts of these potential changes. This would impact projects such as the Village Green, the highways improvements, and traffic and speed mitigations. This is a loss of an estimated £135,000 for the Parish Council. Can the District Council support this through other SIL contributions so that the community of Broadbridge Heath doesn't lose out? Next, police pressures. Sussex Police already objected due to resourcing pressures. Studies indicate that heavy geographical concentrations of socioeconomic disadvantaged people, regardless of whether it is social housing or perhaps cheaper private rentals, can correlate with elevated reports of antisocial behaviour and property crime if local youth provision, community infrastructure and security design are lacking. Next, the impact of unregulated HMOs and particularly on parking and traffic flows. The Hyde Group have had a recent ruling against them by the Property Ombudsman for gross maladministration. One of the items here is the use of properties for houses in multiple occupation or HMOs, where they were not properly monitored and a failure to deal with issues such as crime in their properties. The last significant point is planning policy, and we are aware, obviously, there's been some very recent changes, i.e. yesterday, of the NPPF. UK planning guidance strongly encourages pepper potting or the mixing of affordable and social housing with market rate housing, rather than 100% tenure isolation, precisely to foster social integration and avoid stigmatised or under-resourced pockets within a community. So in closing, we simply ask that members, when reaching their decisions today, give due consideration to the points that are made and the broader concerns around this amended application. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I invite, now invite the officers to come back on points raised by the public.
Yeah, so just on a couple of points raised, I hope that the committee report is clear, but obviously perhaps not as effectively as I had anticipated. But in terms of why this application is returned, it is returned basically only on the changed affordable offer. In all other respects, the development is unchanged from the 92 homes approved back in January. In terms of the statutory requirement for consultation, because the change hasn't fundamentally require an alteration to the development description, it's not a statutory need to do a round of consultation for neighbours or the parish. In terms of things that were said that weren't addressed, such as BNG, that was addressed in the January committee report, and also all the highway matters were, I know, a lot of concern to neighbours, and also a lot of time was spent at the January committee discussing those, but they are settled matters and they are unchanged from what was considered and judged acceptable back in January. In terms of the management, Hyde is, as you heard from the speaker, a well-established registered provider with a record of managing assets. So hopefully that's some reassurance in terms of how the area would be maintained in terms of upkeep and the appearance and the land and the buildings around it. Obviously, it's up to yourselves, members. As I said, it's a delicate balance here, and the loss of the seal receipts is a consideration for you to weigh up against the obvious benefits of an increased provision of affordable. In terms of that exact fine detail of that offer, there is some detail presented indicatively within the report in terms of percentage breakdowns of tenures, but the two sort of important things to take is that the offer is up to 100. So what we are enabling by approving the change to the wording of a legal agreement isn't committing to 100%. What it is, it's just allowing the opportunity to explore up to 100. So this may never materialise 100%. It may come in as 50 or 60 or whatever figure between 37 to 100. And the reason why we can keep it to that flexibility as well as the tenure split is because there's a clause within a further clause in the legal agreement which requires, I'll just get the exact words. So this is what is termed the affordable housing delivery scheme. So that basically is a requirement for a future discharge of the obligation for the final details of a tenure mix. Although what we have presented obviously is a mix of social rent, affordable rent and shared ownership.
Thank you very much. I now open it to debate by the members. Councillor Clark.
Thank you, Chairman. Stupid question. The reason why we're doing this, you just said, is it gives us the option to go up to, etc., etc. So basically, you're opening up an option. What's not clear from the report, but is an assumption on my part, hence the stupid question, is that if it was 100% affordable, social, etc., we would get no SIL whatsoever. Do I presume correctly? That's the first. Do I presume correctly that therefore, if we don't get 100%, then we will get a proportion of the SIL in line with the percentage that comes across? Is my first question. And my second question is, it's not clear, but looking at the section 6.19, I think it is, 6.18, 6.19, the parish council basically was looking forward to 50,000 towards projects that they have. What's not clear from this is if it goes to 100%, do they lose the 50,000 completely, or do we have the opportunity in the S106 to get the 50,000 for the parish council, even though the rest of the SIL disappears? I hope that's clear.
Yeah, so on the first point, the SIL receipt will be proportionate to the amount of market housing that will be delivered. So what you explained is correct. That's the scenario which would happen. On the 50%, so what's quoted in paragraph 6.19, that's a standalone financial contribution which is unaffected and unchanged by this offer, because it was a mitigation, because there wasn't enough open space on the site. So as a mitigation, they offered to provide that as an off-site contribution. So that's unchanged from whatever changes are put forward on the affordable provision. There's always a commitment to that.
So if I've understood you correctly, you're saying that the parish council gets 50 grand no matter what happens, right?
Yes. Well, it's more than that, actually. It's 90 altogether, because there's two separate contributions. But the one that's quoted in there in the paragraph 6.19 is a direct contribution to wider open space. The other one is purely a mitigation, but in combination, it's 90k.
And presumably, if there was a proportion that was still open market, they would get that as well. A portion of it, obviously.
Yes.
Councillor Mercer.
Thank you, Chair. Several other questions or comments, please. I'd be grateful if the officer could comment on what he feels the likelihood is of there being 100%. Secondly, although I hear that the consultation was not statutory, in terms of meeting the helping with the understanding of local residents, might it not have been appropriate in any way to have run a consultation? Thirdly, I appreciate the discussion just held about what SIL might be lost by the parish council, and speaking as a member who sits on the group that advises the council about the use of SIL, it is something that could be taken into account if it were evidenced at that group when it gives that advice. And thirdly, if there is less than 100% of provision, would that 100%, how would the lesser proportion be distributed within the development so would we be talking about a partial pepper potting as described?
So in terms of the likelihood of 100%, well, it is presented up to, and there is a memorandum of understanding presented. Obviously, that's indicative, and it's not a commitment by any party, but it does indicate a direction of intent, I think.
Just in terms of the other questions, Councillor Messer, on consultation, we have a standard practice throughout the planning department and when we consult and when we don't. Obviously, that's based on statutory requirements, and that is based on the level of change in planning terms rather than any kind of views of local residents in order to create consistency. I think, as my colleague has said, change of tenure doesn't actually require planning permission, doesn't change the description of development, and whilst that may be of interest to local residents in planning terms, it's not a significant change and therefore didn't require consultation. And obviously I'm keen we create consistency throughout the planning department on that point. In terms of SIL, in order to be, if you're talking about the strategic SIL pot, because obviously the parish will have their own neighbourhood SIL pot, which they may or may not have sufficient funds in. But in terms of strategic SIL, those projects need to be on the IDP, infrastructure delivery plan. So we could perhaps take that away. Obviously that rests with strategic planning colleagues rather than us as DM officers. But I know they are reviewing that as part of kind of the local plan process. So we can take that away and perhaps the parish can contact us separately on that point. Pepper potting is an old term, and I did have a question from another councillor on this point. Probably when I started planning, you've probably started at the same time as me, Matt. Pepper potting was what was considered to be the right thing to do for affordable housing, whereby you have them here, there and everywhere. The reality is that's difficult for affordable housing providers to manage. And therefore, the current thinking is you group affordable housing together rather than pepper potting them. And that enables for effective management of those properties. Thank you.
Yes, Councillor Raby, sorry.
Firstly, it's really positive if there's an opportunity to get social rent. It's been very difficult to deliver social rent, and it's something that everybody's asked for repeatedly. It will be the same families and individuals, whether it's social or affordable rent. It's just that they will have less burdens on their finances. And the fact is, it's also very difficult to get central government money invested in West Sussex or in Horsham in particular. So if this is money coming from Homes England, potentially, I think we should be really open for it. It's a real win. In addition to that, if you ask the public why they're unhappy about new developments, they say it's not for local people, it's not affordable. And this is improving that. So I just wanted to make that point, and that will influence how I vote on this matter.
I have a question that maybe Councillor Raby might be able to answer, or the officers. How can we ensure that local people do get first bite of the cherry?
So the affordable rent tenure, whether that's social rent or affordable rent, would be subject to the nominations policy of the council. So it's the most impacted ward, local ward first, and then cascades out.
Is that taken from the numbers we have people waiting for housing?
Yeah, our waiting list.
Okay, thank you very much. Councillor Croker.
Thank you, Chair. I have to say that having been part of the January decision, where, if I recall correctly, I voted against, I'm somewhat torn here because the reasons I voted against, which are primarily around layout and transport, haven't changed really. There is an argument they might have got worse. There is another argument they might have got better, but I won't go into that. So I find myself somewhat conflicted because obviously the increase in social housing is to be welcomed. Thank you.
Thank you.
Just briefly, Chairman. Just briefly on that point, I'm sure members are aware, but obviously the decision in January is a significant material consideration that members need to be mindful of today. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Any other member wishing to comment? No? Okay, therefore we shall go to the vote. And the recommendation is to approve full planning permission subject to appropriate conditions and the completion of the necessary Section 106 agreement within 2 months of the decision of this committee, or such longer period as it is agreed by the Director of Place acting reasonably and properly. All those in favour, please show. Any against? Any abstentions?
So just to confirm, that was 11 for, none against and 1 abstention.
Therefore, the recommendations of the officers has been approved. Thank you. If there's anyone from the members of the public wish to leave, you can do so, but you're also very welcome to stay. Thank you. Moving on to item number 6. This item will be dealt with by the Vice Chair and not myself. Thank you.
The next item on the agenda is DC 260010, use of land for the stationing of 6 static caravans for residential purposes to be occupied by gypsies and travelers and associated landscape works. Can I please have the report from the officer?
Thank you, Chair, and good evening, members. Just to clarify to members tonight, conditions 7 and 22, as per the addendum, have been updated and revised. So that will be the basis of the recommendation that members will be voting on tonight. The application relates to 0.79 hectares of undeveloped land north of Gay Street Lane, around 2 kilometres north of Pulborough. The site comprises grassland and scrub vegetation bounded by hedgerows, trees, and the London to Portsmouth Railway line, with access provided via an existing track from Gay Street Lane. The surrounding area is predominantly rural in character, and the site lies within the countryside outside of the built-up area boundary. Planning permission is sought to change the use of the land to provide 6-pitch residential gypsy and traveller site. Each pitch would include a static caravan, amenity space and parking, together with associated access, drainage, landscaping and biodiversity enhancements. Access would be granted via the existing track from Gay Street Lane. The site is allocated for 5 pitches within the emerging Horsham District Local Plan, which is Policy 43. The proposal also includes the siting of cycle and bin stores serving each pitch, in addition to post and rail fencing, as illustrated on the slide here. The western boundary of the site is well screened by existing established trees, planting and foliage, comprising some 51 trees and 3 grouped hedges. 3 trees are proposed to be removed as part of the proposal, 2 of which are circled in red on the slide here. These are already dead, and 1 English oak tree towards the northern boundary of the site is also marked for removal. Further tree works, including crown lifting, is also proposed. The supporting arboricultural statement also proposes a number of tree protection measures, including tree protective fencing surrounding the existing planting and the use of a cell web membrane around the root protection areas of these trees. Members should note that an application nearby the site on Storehouse Lane was granted for a similar use in August of 2025 for 1 pitch at Peacock's Paddock. This supports the principle of the development being considered acceptable in this location, in addition to the site's allocation within the emerging Horsham District Local Plan. This is shown on orange, highlighted in orange on the slide here. Also of note is another application which neighbours the Peacock Paddock at Stalcott Farm, shown on the slide here in blue, which has been refused on 3 occasions. However, these applications were not refused in principle, but rather for landscape and character harm. There is currently a live planning appeal on this site being considered by the Planning Inspectorate, the appeal hearing of which was held last week. In terms of need, I can present the Council's current Gypsy and Traveller need since the publication of the GCAA in 2024. There is an overall need for 80 pitches within the overall period and 61 within the current period, comprising 50 pitches and 11 undetermined needs. We have since approved 47 pitches, which is still short of meeting the overall need by 33 and 14 pitches within the current period. Just for members' information, there are currently 4 applications at appeal with the Inspectorate for 11 pitches in total. These are shown in the orange table on the slide here. This proposal would, of course, contribute towards satisfying that overall need. The site is accessed by the existing track travelling north of Gay Street Lane, which is shown on the slide here, and views into the site are here and also here. The Public Rights of Way team have the Public Rights of Way team objection centres on whether adequate private vehicular access rights exist for future occupiers of the site. It has advised that if the council is satisfied on the matters being and passing bays and signage are secured by condition, its objection could be withdrawn. Condition 8 of section 7 of the report secures this detail. Officers therefore recommend that the application is approved in accordance with the suggested conditions at 7.1 of the committee report. Thank you.
Thank you, Officer. Before we move to the public speakers, I just want to make members aware that I have allowed the addendum from the Polborough Parish Council, which you should have received today. The reason for doing so is that the Parish Council has an emergency meeting this evening dealing with urgent matters. This was considered to be a notable exception due to the circumstances. Could I now ask for the first public speaker, David Peters? I remind you that you have 3 minutes and that we will remind you approximately 15 seconds before the end that you need to finish.
I'm quite surprised that the drawing on the board is anything like reality. I've only 2 things to say about this project. They do not own, and it should not be included, the right of way down there. If you look at the land registry drawing, they do not own, nobody owns that particular piece of land for the way in and out. Their proposal is extending well beyond their boundary that the gentleman purchased. It's here if anybody wants to see it. This piece of land was owned by Daniel Martin several years ago, and he stated there was a right of way. He did not have a right of way to transfer on. He had a right of way in his lifetime. Due to a condition, there is I can't pronounce this because it's a bit big for me, an enfranchisement and copyhold condition, which means any further owners have to go back to the local manor court to get any form of right of way down there. But I say, I'm gobsmacked. I cannot believe when I looked at that. As I say, I brought with me a copy of the land registry thing, and it's as if they've got a right of way down there. But forget that. Further to that, I spend a lot of time down there, and I am appalled at the state of the area down there now, without putting travellers' pitches on it. I've only got 3 minutes, so I'll keep it very short and sweet. There is no drainage. It is landlocked, and they have no rights of way. Further to that, why do we need more travellers' pitches? At 2 o'clock this afternoon, I looked on the social media. There are 9 people, all travellers, advertising properties to rent on the pitches they've got now. For £1,000 a month, anybody can hire a mobile home on a traveller's pitch now. In the last 10 days, I've been on to all 4 sites locally, and I know that there are plenty of pitches there. They don't need any more. I've been on to Kingfisher, Broadbridge Lane.
May I ask you to bring your comments to a close?
The thing is, when you've let all these people have these places, you don't follow it up. You go down Valebridge Lane today and it smells like a public urinal down there because you have not allowed them to do the drains.
These are not planning considerations. Thank you very much.
As I say, I think you should get your facts and figures right.
Thank you. Could I next have Nadia Patet?
I am speaking today in support of this application and respectfully ask members to follow your officer's recommendation to approve planning permission. At its heart, this proposal is about providing 6 permanent pitches for a local and gypsy traveller family in a district that is currently unable to demonstrate a 5-year supply of this deliverable traveller sites. Your officers conclude that this unmet need carries significant weight in favour of the development and that it is entirely consistent with national planning policy. The application has been subject to extensive technical scrutiny over many months. During that process, the scheme has been amended and additional information submitted to address the concerns raised by consultees. Importantly, there are now no objections from the Highway Authority, the Council's landscape architect, the tree officer, the Council's ecologist, Nature Space or Southern Water. Those are the specialist consultees whose role it is to assess the technical planning issues before you today. Many concerns have understandably been raised by local residents, and we fully appreciate those concerns. However, planning decisions must be based on evidence. The Highway Authority has concluded that the proposal would not result in an unacceptable impact on highway safety. The landscape officer concludes that the site is already well enclosed and that the visual effects will be limited and localised. The ecological objections have been resolved through additional surveys and mitigation. Drainage matters are capable of being secured by appropriately worded planning conditions. Your officers have carefully considered every objection received and conclude that none provides a sustainable planning reason for refusal. Members should also note that issues relating to private access rights are legal matters rather than planning matters. As your officers explained, the grant of planning permission neither creates nor overrides private legal rights, and as any such issues must be resolved separately. Finally, this proposal delivers more than simply 6 pitches. It includes biodiversity enhancements exceeding the statutory requirement, substantial landscaping, habitat management and comprehensive package of planning conditions to ensure the development is delivered to a high standard. In undertaking the planning balance, your officers conclude that the limited impacts identified do not significantly and demonstrably
Can I ask you to bring your comments to a close?
outweigh the substantial benefits of meeting an identified and pressing accommodation need. They therefore recommend approval. For those reasons, we respectfully ask members to support the professional recommendation before you and grant planning permission. Thank you.
Thank you. Can I ask the officers if they would like to respond to the speaker's comment?
Thank you, Chair. As members will probably know, the red line does not denote ownership. It relates to the development area. In any case, as the objector said earlier about the land ownership, the correct procedure was followed with the application. So usually when you submit a planning application, you include a certificate saying that you own the land, or if you don't, then you serve notice on the person who does. So in this case, a certificate D was submitted, and that certificate is effectively we don't know who owns the site, so we have advertised this in the paper to basically give wider advertisement to that fact. In terms of drainage, we have dealt with this in the report, and we are satisfied that it can be dealt with by way of condition. And just to go back on a point as well, as per my presentation earlier, we do have an identified need for pitches.
Thank you. I'm going to now open up the debate to the members. Yeah, I'm going to, yes, sorry, as reminded, I'm going to start with allowing the chair to speak.
Just remind you, I'm not speaking as chair. I'm speaking as the ward member for Aldborough, Colwalsham and Amberley. There are a number of issues here with this particular site, and if the officer could bring up on the screen the picture, the lane, which is for many months of the year impassable. But I'll come on to some other points in a minute. I'd like that photograph to remain because I want to point something out. In section 1.2 of the report, it cites that it notes that the site is undeveloped. That is not strictly true, because on that photograph you'll see on the right there is the cottage. On the right hand side there you'll see the cottage. So that and there are other buildings there. So that site is developed already. I also note in section 1.3 the buildings on site are owned by the applicant. That is not true. That is not true either. They're in fact owned by the occupier of the buildings. There is in fact a court order which identifies that these buildings were purchased by the owner of the cottage and all additional work was completed at their cost. That court order also states that they can remain there for as long as they wish. And they mentioned the previous owner, we just heard about the previous owner. The previous owner had been trying for many, many years to remove the occupier of that cottage from that site. They were unsuccessful because there was a court order saying that they could remain there for the rest of their life or until they choose to move. In section 3.42, or sorry, section 3.24, the officer confirms that passing bays and the necessary signage would be acceptable if secured by planning condition. Well, there's no drawings available showing what they're going to be, but it's not possible because on the right-hand side, the right picture there, that land is with the current occupier. On the left-hand side, the line up to that hedge where it joins the track is owned by someone else. So to get the passing bays in, they would have to get an agreement with the owner of that land. And there is significant issues around the ownership of that track. In fact, the land registry do not recognise the owner, or the applicant as the owner of that track. Section 3.10, landscape architecture section. The proposed development is small and in scale and largely contained with a already well-enclosed site. While a well-enclosed site is contrary to PPTS paragraphs 27E. And this is further endorsed by the comment at 6.3 in the committee report. Proposed traveller site would be located within a well-contained parcel of land enclosed by mature trees, hedgerows, and adjacent railway embankment, which isn't shown. And at the back end of that, where the occupier is, there is about a fence of over 2 metres high. So it's going to be very, very enclosed, this site. I also think that because of noise, I'm not sure that we're correct in saying that the human rights is not impacted. And that is because under Article 8 and Article 1 has identified the occupiers of the caravans and the occupier of the cottage are entitled to peaceful enjoyment of their property and private family life. This is due to the noise of the train horns, which I'll come to in a moment, and many of the officers who visited the site were startled by the sound of the horn from the train. Here, there's also been no engagement with Network Rail. This development goes up to the boundary of the railway, and there should have been an asset protection assessment conducted to ensure that the site was still accessible and safe for the railway. This is a similar aspect that was at Greendean, 65 homes at Greendean, which was about 1.5 miles from this particular site. And this asset protection assessment must be done when dealing with site drainage. No reference into the condition of engaging with Network Rail. Just beyond this site, there is a footpath crossing the railway that is on a section of track where we had a fatality. And there's no mention of that, the risk assessment on the footpath. Many issues with this. Noise needs to be considered. Policy 33. This is where we had a similar situation. Just here on the right, there is a cottage right near the kitchen. We're going to propose with 6 pitches, somewhere in the region of about 4,000 vehicle movements a year. That's based on government statistics. And it was noted in the 2 Mile Ash application that was refused that the following policy 33 requires developments to, amongst other matters, be designed to avoid unacceptable harm to amenity of occupants of nearby property. I also think that HDF policy 23 there must be no significant barriers to development in terms of flooding. Well, that floods every year. Poor drainage, poor ground stability, or proximity to other hazards, land or installation where conventional housing would not be suitable. And we're proposing to put 6 caravans right where the whistleboard is, right where they sound a train horn in excess of 85 decibels from 6 a.m. in the morning till 12 at night. I could go on, but I want to just mention one other thing. The government's planning policy for traveller sites, December 24, paragraph 13E, which notes provide for proper consideration of the effects of local environmental quality, such as noise and air quality, on the health and well-being of any travellers that may locate there or on others as a result of the new development. As I mentioned, noise of the train horns, sound from 6 a.m. to 12 midnight and in excess of 85 decibels. And there has been no assessment of that, the train horn and acoustic assessment on this site, which was done for a similar site right next to the railway, only 1.5 miles from here. I would like the Vice Chair to come back to me because I would like to put forward an alternative motion. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Brown. Before I do that, and before I invite you to speak, Councillor Clark, would the officers like to come back on any of the assertions that were made?
Yes, thank you, Vice Chair. Just in relation to Councillor Ellis Brown's comments about the lane being impassable and not being able to secure the passing places because of land ownership issues. I mean, similar to what we said earlier on in the presentation, that is a separate legal process from which would have to go through at some point. It's not a material planning matter in terms of this application. I think it's condition 8 on the scheduled list of conditions does request this detail prior to commencement development above slab level. So obviously the development does hinge on that condition, or it would hinge on that condition to some extent. So the developer would not be able to go any further beyond slab level if they're not able to, reasonably come to a conclusion with the landowners of that property. In terms of amenity, and obviously officers have taken a view that we consider the proposal not to have an adverse amenity impact in terms of impact on neighbouring properties and also the proposed occupants as well. The site is well spaced, it's in the countryside and it is well screened. But obviously members are, if there is a general consensus to you, we can take a different view if you so wish.
Just to pick up on one point around the planning policy for gypsies and travellers. Now, unfortunately, this is not 100% clear in the new NPPF, but I think it's important to bring this to members' attention. So obviously the new NPPF was published yesterday. Within that document, it says, and I will just read what it says: written ministerial statements and other planning policy documents which have been incorporated or superseded. The content of the following written ministerial statements and other documents, where they relate to planning policies or decisions, have either been fully or partially incorporated within the National Planning Policy Framework or no longer represent up-to-date government guidance, government policy. And within that list is planning policy for traveller sites. So, well, the problem is the planning policy for traveller sites haven't been taken down from the government website. But obviously, as Councillor Brown's raised significant weight in terms of the comments raised within that, I thought it was important to bring that to your attention. Now, based on that, I think it's our view that we can give less weight at this point to the PPTS, because the new NPPF states that it's either fully or partially been incorporated with the NPPF or no longer represents up-to-date government policy, and then it lists that. So I think we just need to be mindful of what weight may be given to the PPTS in light of the comments that were published in the new NPPF yesterday. Now, obviously, we're waiting for government, because they haven't taken it off the website. We were hoping there'd be some clarity, but obviously timing is we've got this decision before us. And my interpretation of that, and I welcome any view from my legal colleague, is that we cannot no longer give full weight to that policy. Thank you.
Thank you.
Can I come back on that?
Yes, Councillor.
So, okay, I just point out that under the new NPPF, Chapter 17, Policy 3, it continues with what was in paragraph 198 of the previous NPPF. And when looking at when reading the NPPF, you need to read it in conjunction with PPTS. And now I don't know the legal position, as the officer has explained, but Chapter 17, I think it's Policy 3, Part 2A, continues with what was in paragraph 198 of the previous NPPF.
I am getting to you, Councillor Clark. Did you have anything? Or did you have any feedback on that? Okay. Councillor Clark.
Thank you, Chairman. Before I make a comment or anything, a comment that the officer just made just now raises in my mind a problem. If you put up the photograph of the access to the site, you've got the track. Yeah, that track. You pointed out in condition 8 says no development above slab level should take place until the details of proposing blah blah, etc., etc. My comment is, how can anything be developed on the site before that access is resolved? So does that condition make sense in the way it is drafted?
Are you talking in terms of rights of access, Councillor Clark?
No, what I'm saying is that you say no development above slab level should take place until the details of proposed passing bays, etc., the approved details, etc. You can't do any development on the site below or above slab level until you've done that. So is the drafting correct in condition 8 in the way it's been drafted before I go on to make my comment? How do you do it physically? I'm sorry to raise the issue so late on. I raised plenty of other issues earlier on that you modified the condition, but this one's just occurred to me.
Yeah, I think that is thinking about I think that could easily be resolved by alternative wording. It's just thinking about what wording that is, because you can't do pre-commencement because the works to the access and the parking bays are development in themselves. So you can't do pre-commencement. You could say no works shall commence on the pitches until the access and the parking bays have been in place, something to that effect, if that would address your concerns. I see what you mean. You need the access in the parking bays before you then move forward. So I think that's easily, we could think about the exact wording, but that can easily be accommodated into amended condition.
Thank you, Chairman. Well, I mean, we need to work that into the system somehow. I mean, my only comment really, the only positive thing I can say about this planning application is at least we're not doing it a retrospective because it's already been slapped on the land and we've got no choice. That's the only positive thing to say about it. I mean, I made my comments pre the meeting. I don't have any major problem with the site itself being for 6 pitches. I mean, a lot of the issues have not been addressed, as my fellow councillor has pointed out. And my comment about the noise issues, well, if somebody wants to live there, well, that's their problem, isn't it? Don't see it as being an issue. So I'm not enamoured with it, but I can live with it, provided all the issues are addressed.
Councillor Mercer.
Thank you. I have to say, these late changes are really very confusing, and particularly in terms of the various acronyms being used and the reference to specific detailed paragraphs. I appreciate it's our job to handle that, but I'm just passing that as comment. Can I be clear that what we're being advised by the head of development is that the relevant section on Gypsy and traveller sites in the NPPF, the policy guidelines that we used to use have now been withdrawn? That's question one. The second question is, one of the people who came to speak about this application asked or said, why do we need more sites? And I think it would be helpful to understand again what it is that generates the overall target number for the district and how that calculation is driven by regulation. Because obviously people are not clear about that and why the district planning committee has to consider that.
In terms of the first point, Councillor Mercer, obviously the new NPPF only came out yesterday. Officers have done an assessment of the NPPF, which is in the addendum, and our view is it doesn't change our recommendation. In fact, there are parts of that which we feel adds weight to a recommendation for approval. There is a lack of clarity in terms of the position of the planning policy for travellers document, as Councillor Ellis-Brown has pointed out and I've explained. Notwithstanding that, whether it remains in place or not, the officer's recommendation does not change. We still consider the proposal is acceptable. I hope that helps. Obviously, in the coming days, hopefully we'll fully understand that, but it doesn't change our recommendation. And I've completely forgotten the need point. So we have a requirement to provide a 5-year supply of Gypsy and traveller sites. That is our requirement. That need, in terms of what that is generated by our own evidence base, which is conducted by our strategic planning colleagues, which is often done to support local plans. So they will often engage specialist consultants to engage the community around needs. And that evidence-based document then informs our policies and what the numbers we're quoting you today. I hope that helps.
Councillor Vickers.
Yes, thank you, Chairman. Just very briefly, I'd like to thank the officers for the site visit. It was very helpful actually to go on the site. I was amazed at the sound that came from the trains in close proximity to this site, and I'm amazed that any person would want to live that close to that amount of noise. If I've understood correctly, Councillor Ellis-Brown said no noise assessment had been done. And I have serious concerns that anybody living that close to a railway line with that level of noise is going to affect their well-being. And to say there's no impact on any adjoining or nearby resident, I think understates the proximity of that cottage to the activity that will be generated from this site. So I have serious concerns. But if somebody could just clarify for me at what level of noise is acceptable to live in close proximity to for any occupiers, whether it's Gypsy and Travellers or anybody else. I cannot believe anybody would want to build a house that close to a railway line. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Vickers. We have comments from our environmental health colleagues in the report, but they do not expressly, whilst they're not objecting to it on noise grounds, that they're not expressly mentioning any noise from trains, etc. Obviously, the officer's view it is acceptable, but we acknowledge, that there isn't a noise assessment submitted. In terms of noise generated from this development to any neighbouring occupiers, it is a residential use. It's very difficult to substantiate any kind of reason for refusal, saying one residential use has a harmful noise impact on another. Neighbours live next to each other. It's not an argument you substantiate, but clearly the noise from any trains would be something that members would need to consider. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor No.
Thank you, Vice Chair. I too was very pleased to make this visit that was requested by officers. So, along with another councillor, I visited yesterday. It was a beautiful afternoon. Grasshoppers hopping around, birds in evidence. And one thing that did strike us both was the dominance of the oak in the middle of the field. I wouldn't say it's a veteran oak by any manner of means, but it's certainly a mature oak and very significant in the area. I noticed our arboricultural officer has noted that this tree is going to have to be felled for absolutely no reason other than making this site more acceptable. I don't think that's right. On top of that, the other trees that are bordering the site are also going to have to be removed to enable the access. Now, this access point is very important and it worries me a lot. There is no access to the site at the moment because it's a public right-of-way. I noticed that West Sussex County Council have also objected to this because that the access route actually is not a public highway, it's a public right-of-way, it's a footpath bordered by trees. Now, if that is converted into an access route, those trees will have to come down. It's a public footpath which is regularly used because you can see from the width of the track that it is used obviously by dog walkers. In fact, some walkers passed us when we were visiting. It's obviously a well-used route, but it is a public footpath. West Sussex County Council aren't at all happy about it being made into an access route. And in fact, although it's been mentioned earlier on that that can be converted into an access route, that needs permission from the Rights of Way Committee, and that is not forthcoming at this point in time. So I don't see how we can possibly approve this application. There are grounds against biodiversity, the beauty and the nature of this field in question, and the access, which is impossible at this moment in time. So I'm afraid I'm very unhappy about this application. I don't see how I can support it.
Thank you. Do the officers wish to respond to that?
Yeah, thank you, Vice Chair. So with regards to the tree, so the arboricultural method statement does set out that it's a category C tree, which our arboricultural officer hasn't disagreed with. And I revised over it this morning, actually, because I did think this might come up. So the AMS does specify that it has a cavity at the trunk, so it's indicating that it's unwell and it may go at some point. I spoke to the arboricultural officer this afternoon as well, and he said it's a relatively young tree, with a cavity in its base. And he said, given its siting in the centre of the site, which is shielded by existing planting and trees, it holds limited amenity value, and therefore its removal would have limited landscape harm. So from an arboricultural point of view, and our arboricultural officer's view, they're not concerned about it being removed. As to your point regarding the access, so part of the conditions that was revised and sent around in the event addendum this morning actually came about from Councillor Clark's correspondence yesterday. So condition 7 has been amended. So this relates to the arboricultural method statement. So we've included, in brackets here, including the proposed pitches. So it's bringing on anything on the site. So we need to know that any measures that they're implementing have accounted for them being able to bring in the equipment and the pitches as well. So it's effectively we're trying to account for that with the wording of the condition, and also the addition of including any making good of the existing access into the site as well. So if there's any soil compaction or anything that might have been left or might impact on the trees along that access.
Just in terms of the rights of way officer, my understanding the primary concern was in related to rights of access. Ultimately, we've explained that that's not material to planning. Clearly, if any works are needed to the public right of way, that may well be necessary through other consents outside of planning. So, granting a planning permission doesn't override any of those consents. And I know, Councillor Knoll, you raised a general point around biodiversity. There is no evidence to substantiate any biodiversity issues with this site. Our ecology consulted and nature space, who are our newt specialists, are satisfied and raise no objection subject to condition. So we can't raise general concerns without an evidence base to support that. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Lambert.
Thank you, Vice Chair. Environmental health, the only noise they mention is from lighting and site activities and local people. Did they actually go and visit and hear the train? I mean, if Councillor Vickers, who's deaf,
Very deaf,
could hear a huge noise like that, and from 6 in the morning till midnight, could not a noise assessment have happened?
I think officers acknowledge that. I don't have that answer, Councillor Lambert. We've got the comments that we've got in the report. I'm not aware what other detailed assessment or whether they heard the trains, and obviously we don't have a noise assessment, so I think members need to be mindful of that in terms of what decision you make today. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any more questions? Before I come to you, Councillor Ellis-Brown, just one comment of my own I'd like to make. We've been talking a lot about trains. I think what we haven't mentioned about the trains is that there is an intersection that they're coming up with at a road. So that I'm not an expert on train law, but I know there are two people here in the room who are. But they're obliged to blow the horn. And the horn is blown, is that the word? Right at the site. So the people living beneath it will be hearing the horn being blown again every half an hour during the day. And again, I would just state that I think at the very minimum there should have been a proper noise assessment, and I can't imagine it was done with those trains being passed. So I acknowledge that your statements about the lack of a noise assessment, but I'll leave it at that. And I will, unless there is last chance for any further questions before I hand back to Councillor Ellis-Brown. Councillor Ellis-Brown is going to put forward an alternative motion.
Okay, motion is that train noise and vehicle movements have a significant impact on residential amenity contrary to MPPF December 24, paragraph 198, and MPPF August 26, chapter 17, policy 3, and paragraph 13E of the PPTS and HDPF 2015 policy 33. There's also the isolation of the site, and that's paragraph 27 of the planning policy for traveller sites. And that says the site is physically enclosed, in particular by adjoining railway embankment, and its location and degree of enclosure give precisely the impression of deliberate isolation. The contrary to policy HDPF policy 23E that says there must be no significant barriers to development exist in terms of flooding, poor drainage, poor ground stability and proximity to other hazards such as train horns. And finally, no evidence of consultation with Network Rail in terms of an asset protection assessment that gives the site's location adjacent to the operational element an assessment in terms of risk, and a separate acoustic assessment and air quality should have been undertaken. Taken together, these matters demonstrate the adverse impacts of granting permission would significantly and demonstrably outweigh the benefits of the proposal. Accordingly, the presumption in favour of sustainable development tilted balance does not apply, and yet does not apply. Do I have a second for that? Councillor Vickers. Oh, sorry.
Yes. You are forgiven. Yes.
Can I comment?
Yes, please. Do comment.
Thank you, Chairman. I note the motion has been put forward and it's seconded, so members will now have an opportunity to vote on it. Before you do, well, first off, I'm unclear that we talked about train noise and vehicle amenity and vehicle movements on residential amenity. Whose residential amenity are we talking about? Existing residents or those occupying the site? Clearly, we've talked about train noise for those occupying the site. I have commented on the lack of an ability to refuse on amenity of neighbouring residents. So there's no clarity on that point. I appreciate you might come back, Councillor Ellis-Brown, but I'll just comment on the other point. We talked about the isolation of the site and being physically enclosed. You know, officers acknowledge that point. We do not feel that substantiates a reason for refusal that can be defended as appeal, particularly based on other appeal decisions we've had. In terms of no evidence of consultation with Network Rail, I think ultimately, certainly in the first instance, that would be our responsibility as a local planning authority, and therefore, as an alternative, members, and I recognise you need to vote on that motion, as an alternative, and which I feel perhaps better addresses the concerns that have been raised today, would be to defer the application to consider train noise and consultation with Network Rail. But clearly, Councillor Ellis-Brown has put forward an motion, so due process is that you therefore vote on that. But to me, it sounds like potentially those matters could be addressed or certainly further considered within a live planning application, be brought back to committee. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes.
I find it very difficult for the sound of the train horns to be mitigated. Firstly, you would have to slow the trains down so that the whistle board is then further away from development. That's the first thing. The other thing, these are static caravans. These are not brick-built homes, they are static caravans. And in the previous version of the emerging local plan, it said that people living in caravans are more susceptible to noise. This sound is such a high level, the mitigation would be very, very difficult. That's all on this point. So I think just to clarify, the train noise has a significant impact on the occupier of the potential occupiers of the site, and the vehicle movements on the residential immediacy of the current occupiers, just to clarify that point.
Thank you. Does anybody wish to comment before we can?
Very quickly, Chairman, sorry, I don't want to go back and forth, but just very quickly on Councillor Ellis Brown's point around noise of the train horns. Ultimately, members can come to a view on that. But I think from my point of view is you don't have a technical evidence base to support a refusal. You know, how do we know, maybe you do, but how do we know what's an acceptable train noise or not? You know, I think we'd at least need comments from our environmental health officer on that specific point to substantiate something we can refuse. But, you know, I'm not a train expert or a noise consultant. So ultimately, members, it's for you to vote. Thank you.
I'm going to ask Councillor Ellis Brown, in light of what he's heard, would he consider adapting his alternative motion for there being a proper noise assessment made and this to be brought back to council for further discussion?
I am concerned that my concern about deferring this, as we all know, is then we're open to a challenge of appeal for non-determination. And to be clear, this was validated back in January this year, and the onus is on the applicant to put forward significant information to allow us to make a substantial and sound decision. And I pointed out in my earlier that we did exactly this for 65 homes next to the railway at Green Dean. We had an acoustic assessment, and because of that, they said they did to put some mitigation sound fencing in or kill the sound. They had to do that. They had to change the footpath crossing to make it safer because of people being close to that particular area, such as this, where someone was hit by a train and killed last year, a fatality. So I think we could, myself and the head of building control, could keep going back to and fro. I think the important thing to change is train noise will impact the amenity and the people who will be living there. And that is contrary to various policies. The vehicle movements will impact the residential amenity on the people, the occupier of that particular site, just as we heard, or just as the outcome was for the recent application for another part of the district. Thank you.
Thank you. What I'm going to propose, if this is acceptable, is that we will first hear again to read out Councillor Ellis Brown's motion, and I will ask for a seconder.
We've done that.
Okay, we will have a vote on that. If it fails, then we will perhaps consider again whether or not we do a deferral, and then we'll go to the recommendation. Is that okay?
You're the chair, sorry.
Well, thank you. So could I ask Councillor Ellis Brown please to read out the recommendation again, abbreviated if possible?
Okay. The motion is the committee moves to refuse the application for the following reasons. Train noise, which significantly impacts the amenity of the potential residents of the site, contrary to various policies. Vehicle movements would also impact the residential amenity of the current occupier, contrary to various policies identified. The isolation of the site, paragraph 27E of the planning policy, Traverse sites, because the site is physically enclosed, in particular by the adjoining railway embankment and its location, degree of enclosed fencing to the right of the site give the impression of deliberate isolation. It's in contrary to policy HDPF policy 23E. There must be no significant barriers in terms of flooding, poor drainage, poor ground stability, or proximity of other hazards, such as train horns. And then there's no evidence of consultation with Network Rail in terms of asset protection because of its close proximity. It's on the boundary of the railway, and we've seen that in previous applications where we've asked Network Rail to comment. Thank you.
Thank you. And I know Councillor Vickers has seconded. So could we move to a show of hands for those in favour of supporting the alternative motion? To refuse. Sorry, a reminder that Councillor Clark and Councillor Ellis Brown cannot vote.
Sorry, just so you've just done 5 people who they were for that, so against.
So now for those against the recommendation. 1, 2, 3, 4. Those abstaining?
How are you, John? How are you voting?
I voted in favour of the motion.
The motion's passed.
So it should be passed 5-4.
6 now.
6-4 and no abstentions.
So that's correct, yeah.
So the motion,
The alternative
motion has passed.
So that refuses it.
And the application is refused. I would comment that I do hope an alternative site for these families can be found that is not close to train tracks such as these. Thank you. I'm going to now hand back to Councillor Ellis Brown for the rest of the meeting.
Thank you very much. Members of the public who wish to leave, you can do so. You want an adjournment?
No, not adjournment.
The next one, we've got Mike Hooper to speak as well. Okay, because so do you want to put that down on your bit?
I will allow a timeout of 5 minutes, but please don't engage with members of the public. Thank you very much. Okay, thank you. Moving on to item 7. This is 82 Bedford Road, Horsham, West Sussex, RH13 5BH. Please could the officer present the application to committee? Thank you very much.
Thank you, Chair. The application relates to an end of terrace property on Bedford Road within the built-up area of Horsham. The property has been converted from 2 flats back into a single dwelling. The site is located within an established residential area characterised by similar dwellings and a pattern of domestic alterations and extensions. Part retrospective planning permission is sought for the erection of a rear extension. The proposed extension would provide an additional bedroom with an ensuite and would be constructed using materials to match the existing dwelling. Although the submitted plans show the property being reconfigured into a 6-bedroom HMO, this application relates solely to the rear extension. Furthermore, the permission relates only to the rear extension and not the side rear extension that has recently been built. An informative is attached to the report to indicate that this is the case. The existing and proposed rear elevations are shown here on the slide with the red cross denoting which we're not considering tonight. The side elevations are shown here. Further to the addendum sent earlier today, the measurements as per the report are correct and have been scaled correctly on the plans. And the floor plans here illustrating the extent of, I've got something on my screen. The extent of the proposed floor area for the single-storey side rear extension, highlighted and red to the right. As noted, the application is part retrospective and that works have commenced, including partial demolition of the rear elevation and laying of foundations and walls above slab level for the proposed rear extension. The side rear extension is not subject to the application, which is just shown on the leftmost picture there. Officers are aware of neighbouring comments relating to the dwelling being utilised as a HMO. However, the application before members tonight seeks only permission for the rear extension. Though the proposal may well facilitate the use of a HMO, the application is not for a HMO, which in any case would represent a form of permitted development granted under Class L of Schedule 2, Part 1 of the General Permitted Development Order that does not require formal planning permission. Whilst it is understood that there may well be outstanding matters with the applicant and the Council's Environmental Health and Licensing team regarding the suitability for a HMO licence, this is not subject of the application and is therefore not a material planning consideration in this instance. In any case, there is no HMO application with our licensing team at the moment. Accordingly, members are invited to consider the design and appearance of the extension and the impact on neighbouring amenity. Officers recommend that the application is approved in accordance with the suggested conditions. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I'd like to invite the first public speaker on this application. That's Jenny Caporellini. Sorry, I do apologise. I struggle with English. Have 3 minutes. Thank you.
Chair and members of the committee, thank you for allowing me to speak. I ask that you look carefully at the officer's report because, although the factual errors raised have now been corrected, it still does not properly assess the true planning impacts. Following planning application DC 251366, permitted on the 22nd of October 2025, you should know that the conversion back to the original house to allow the permitted development rights for the HMO did not occur. The report describes this as a modest domestic extension, yet it acknowledges that the extension provides an additional bedroom and ensuite which facilitates the 6-bedroom layout shown on the submitted plans, an increase from 2 bedrooms to 6. This is not an ordinary extension to improve living accommodation. It significantly increases the property's capacity and intensity of use. The extension projects 5 metres from the original house, not 3 metres as previously understated. The report refers to numerous similar rear extensions along Bedford Road, but the council's own map does not show any comparable extension projecting this far into the garden. The garden is smaller than similar properties due to a rear access alley. Members should be satisfied that the examples relied upon are genuinely comparable in scale and impact and not simply accept the description of this as a typical or modest extension. Overdevelopment is not simply a question of whether an extension is large or small. Here it forms part of a 6-bedroom, 6-ensuite layout on a constrained plot with a consequent reduction in garden space. The smaller side stroke rear extension has already been built, and the larger extension is partly constructed. While the smaller extension is not part of the decision today, it now forms part of the physical context of this constrained site, and the cumulative effect of the built form needs to be considered. The larger extension is also over or in close proximity to a public sewer without approval, and Southern Water has escalated this. The officer concludes that the proposal complies with the relevant design policies, which require development to preserve and enhance local character, respond sympathetically to surroundings, and achieve a high quality of design. This proposal does not achieve those aims. Its significant projection, together with the materials and poor quality of construction also visible on site, is not sympathetic to the original Victorian building and creates an overdeveloped appearance. It falls well below the standard expected of good design. The Council's own housing and homelessness strategy recognises significant pressure on family accommodation due to overcrowding and set a target of providing larger homes. The committee should therefore consider the foreseeable planning consequences of permitting further physical development which facilitates...
Could you bring your comments to conclusion, please?
Increasing intensive form of accommodation. I ask members to consider the cumulative effect of the development, the increased intensity created by the additional bedroom, the constrained nature of the site, and the quality of the resulting build. I respectfully ask you to refuse permission.
Thank you very much. Now I'd like to invite Claire Brennan, and you two have 3 minutes.
Chair, members of the committee, thank you for allowing me to speak this evening. The submitted plans show 6 bedrooms, each with an ensuite, served by a shared internal kitchen diner. That configuration is now substantially constructed on site. I want to clarify that point because the report refers in places to this layout as something that the development could facilitate. I'm not asking you to determine its planning status. I'm asking you to consider the application in its actual physical context. My concern is whether the additional bedroom and ensuite created by this application are acceptable when considered as part of that accommodation layout. The important point is that this extension adds a bedroom without adding any communal accommodation. The only communal space shown is a small internal kitchen diner with no window providing natural daylight or outlook, no natural ventilation, and no separate living room. It is also the only shared kitchen, dining, and principal communal space shown on the plans. Those limitations are directly relevant to the residential amenity of the additional occupier. The National Planning Policy Framework requires planning decisions to secure a high standard of amenity for existing and future users. More broadly, Article 8 of the European Convention on Human Rights protects the right to respect for private and family life and the home. This does not determine the planning decision, but it reinforces the importance of properly considering the living conditions created by the development. In my view, the report has not demonstrated that the additional bedroom can satisfactorily accommodated within the existing communal arrangement. The report considers context and comparison when assessing garden impact. The same approach should be applied when assessing the residential amenity consequences of this additional accommodation. This is also relevant to overdevelopment. The issue is not simply the physical size of the extension, but what it provides, an additional bedroom and ensuite without additional communal provision to support it. I therefore ask you to consider one specific question: does the additional bedroom and ensuite provide an acceptable standard of accommodation, given the very limited communal facilities that physically exist on the site? I'm not asking you to determine the planning status of that existing accommodation. I'm not asking you to assess the extension in its actual physical context. That context is directly relevant to whether the additional bedroom provides an acceptable standard of residential amenity. That is why I ask you to refuse this application. Thank you.
No, thank you very much. I'd like to invite Catherine McLean. claims, so I do apologise. And you too have 3 minutes.
Thank you for allowing me to speak. I'm here as a resident who owns the property at 80 Bedford Road to object to this application. Firstly, I'd like to address that point 1.3 of the Planning Committee report suggests the report relates only to the extension, not the transition to an HMO. I ask the Planning Committee to reconsider this, as the extension will purely facilitate the creation of an HMO. I want to talk to you today about people. Firstly, the people who may be living at the HMO at 82 Bedford Road. My concern is not simply about the number of bedrooms, it's about the quality of accommodation being created, the impact on existing residents, and whether this proposal is consistent with the Council's own stated priorities. A 6-bed HMO means up to 6 unrelated adults sharing what was originally designed to be a small family dwelling. Yet there appears to be no dedicated provision for laundry facilities. The remaining outdoor amenity space would be extremely limited, with approximately 5 square metres or less of garden left, before accounting for bin storage, bicycle storage, access routes, and the practical need for doors and windows to open. The garden of this property is already 3 foot smaller than those houses of the similar size due to access paths. The question here is this genuinely the kind of living environment you at HDC want to promote? HDC's own Homes for Tomorrow report outlines the need for more family homes, not HMOs. Horsham District Council also emphasises the importance of housing to meet people's needs and supporting well-being. A heavily intensified HMO with limited outdoor space struggles to meet these aspirations. Secondly, I want you to consider the existing community, myself and my family included. This extension will create overlooking into my own property. There is a document on the HDC website which states that if the extension is within a 45-degree angle of a living space, namely my dining room, this should be considered. This was initially put into the planning report, but it was later removed. There have been 51 objections to this application. Those objections represent real people who already live here. HDC's council plan repeatedly speaks about supporting people and communities, building trust in decision-making and ensuring local people have a real opportunity to shape the services and outcomes. I appreciate that you're operating in an unusual period without an adopted local plan, and that means it's even more important that decisions are guided by the council's wider strategic objectives. The annual plan currently refers to supporting people and communities, creating nature diverse places to live in, and listening to communities and involving them in decision-making. Before concluding, I'd like to bring to the attention the fact that this matter was due to come to this committee on the 21st of July. This was withdrawn from the agenda on the morning of the 21st of July with no explanation. The Planning Committee has since been edited to remove the inclusion of items such as the side return that was stated earlier and the overlooking and overshadowing of my own
comments
property.
to conclusion, please.
I request in the committee discussion that an explanation regarding the reasoning for these edits. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I'd now like to invite Mike Hooper, and you have 3 minutes. Thank you. This was a late acceptance, so you won't find it on your list.
Okay, thank you, Chair, members of the Planning Committee. I'm the planning agent speaking in support of the application. Now, I appreciate this application has raised significant local interest, and I fully understand my neighbours have raised concerns. However, I respectfully ask the committee to determine the application on planning grounds alone, on the development that is actually before you. This application is simply for a modest single-storey rear extension. It is not an application for change of use, and it is not an application seeking permission for an HMO. As your officers have correctly explained, the use of the property falls under separate planning legislation and is not something this application can lawfully determine. When we focus on the extension itself, the planning position is clear. The proposed extension is appropriate in scale, constructed in materials that are matching the existing property, and is located to the rear, so it will have limited impact on the street scene. There are similar rear extensions in this part of Horsham, so it sits comfortably within the established character of the area. Now, your officers have also carefully assessed the impact on neighbouring properties. They concluded there be no unacceptable loss of light, outlook or privacy, and no overbearing impact. Environmental health raised some concerns about fire escape arrangements, and these have been fully addressed in the plans. And there's now no objection. Likewise, West Sussex Highways have raised no objection also. Importantly, officers have considered every objection received. They've concluded many of the issues raised, including HMO standards, licensing, building regs and internal layout, are matters controlled under different legislation and cannot be part of this decision-making process. The officer report concludes that the proposal complies with relevant national and local policies, it preserves the character of the area, protects neighbouring amenity, raises no highway concerns, and satisfies technical consultees. For those reasons, your professional officer recommends approval, and I therefore respectfully ask members to support the recommendation and grant planning permission. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I now invite the officers to respond to points raised.
Thank you, Chairman. I'll come in with a couple of points and my colleague will respond to some of the detailed matters. The last speaker kind of covered this point to some extent, but just to be clear, when an application is submitted, within the application form, they provide a description of development. That is shown on the committee report. So you'll see it says erection of single-storey rear extension. We are obliged and legally obliged to consider the development applied for, not a different development that they have not applied for. So therefore, we're not being asked, we cannot consider the change of use of the building to an HMO. That's not being applied for. So we have to focus on the description of development that has been applied for. And the officer understanding is that use has not been implemented in any event. So it's not the lawful use of the building at this moment in time. Going back to that point and why the application was pulled from the last agenda, it was brought to my attention that the committee report covered 2 extensions. So can we show this on the plan? Yeah, but can you the floor plan? So we've got the red box and then the cross. So upon receiving that, I checked the application form to see what had been applied for. And on the application form, it said single-storey extension and therefore referred, in my view, to the one in the box. Unhelpfully, 2 are shown on the plan. But on the application form, it was clear that 1 extension was being applied for. And the applicant clarified at that point, they are only applying for the one in the red box. As I said, we can't consider things that are not being applied for. That's not how the planning system works. So we had to therefore amend the report to reflect the fact that the applicant was only applying for the extension in the red box. And that's why we had to pull it from the agenda, because we can't consider something that the applicant is not seeking permission for. I hope that clarifies that point, and I'll just pass on to my colleague. Thank you.
So some comments were raised regarding the public sewer to the side of the site. So, I mean, as they said correctly, you can't remove or do anything to a sewer. This development, I mean, if any alterations are proposed to the sewer, then permissions will be needed from Southern Water. It's not something that the planning department or local authority in general would get involved with. With regards to overlooking and the 45-degree angle, as Emma's just mentioned, that primarily related to the single-storey side/rear extension. So, which is obviously shown on the slides here with the cross through it. In terms of overlooking as well, this is a single-storey extension at ground floor level. It's not anticipated that an extension of this nature would result in adverse amounts of overlooking, especially over and above the existing arrangement. And in any case, this is a development within a built-up area boundary. where there would be expected some levels of mutual overlooking from neighbours, using their gardens or looking out their windows or looking into their neighbours' windows. So it's not considered something out of the ordinary in this context.
Thank you very much. Now open it up for debate by members. Councillor Knoll, and then I'll come to Councillor Vickers.
Thank you, Chair. Just a quick question of officers. One of the speakers referred to a remaining area of 5 square metres in the garden. I can't really. Is that right? Or am I misunderstanding what's going on? They're extending just the larger part of the ground floor. Is that right? So what does that leave in areas of space? Can I just look at the...
To you in a moment, Councillor Croker.
I'm just a bit confused about the area with
This
red
is
cross
relating
on
to this
it.
point. Just a moment there.
Okay, sorry.
Please, sorry. Councillor Croker, yes.
Yeah, sorry, I looked at this earlier, and based on the drawings and a bit of playing around, the current garden area is 38 square metres, and that reduces to 27 square metres. So roughly a 30% reduction in garden area.
Okay, thank you. Sorry to interrupt you, Councillor Knoll.
No, I think Councillor Croker's answered my question. So thank you very much, Councillor Croker.
Councillor Vickers.
Thank you, Chairman. I hear what the Head of Development has said. This is a single-storey rear extension, which sounds perfectly acceptable, and I'm focusing on this extension. Could we see the photograph again that you had up just a few moments ago, please? I'm concerned about the actual size of the extension. One of the speakers said the report says 3 metres, but in fact it's actually 5 metres, and it looks considerably more when you look at the block plan than some of the residents. And I know this road, Bedford Road, you're correct, you can't see it from the road, so it doesn't impact on the street scene. But I do have some concern about the design and the impact on the next door. Is it a 3 metre extension or a 5 metre extension?
So just to clarify, there is an existing extension already, as you'll see on the photo on the left, which has been part demolished. So if we go back to the slide here where I've included the measurements, so that does include part of the existing extension.
Right. Okay.
So it's a 3 metre extension beyond what was there previously.
Which already has permission, the other bit.
Which has been there historically. So in total it would project 5.28 metres from the rear, but it's a 3 metre extension on top of what's already there.
That is considerably deeper than the 3 properties that were shown on the block plan. There.
I wouldn't say considerably so.
And you're suggesting there's no impact on the next door neighbour who said it would impact on her dining room?
Yes, so obviously the sun rises in the east and sets in the west. The front elevation of the property is south facing, so the rear elevation is already facing north. There's not going to be any direct loss, or there wouldn't be any direct loss or on sunlight because of the way that the sun sets and rises. And as I said, it's a single story extension, so it's likely that fencing and any other building within the area would already reduce the amount of sunlight that would come through the garden into the neighbouring properties in any case.
Can you just confirm for me, this is an end of terrace house, it's a
Yes.
fairly small house, and it's now going to be 6 bedrooms, if this is approved?
We're not considering the change of use to 6 bedrooms, councillor Vickers.
Just the rear extension?
Just the rear extension.
So what's the rear extension going to be used for?
The floor plans indicate that it would be for a bedroom, but the internal layout of the building is not, well,
It's not relevant.
it's not relevant
Okay.
because you don't need planning permission to reorganise the inside of your house unless it's listed.
Councillor Lambert, and then I come to you, Councillor Raby.
Thank you. No, I think when the speaker spoke about the extension, she wasn't talking about the sunshine and where it rises and where it sets. She was talking about the overlooking at an angle of 45 degrees into her dining room.
The elevations. There are no windows that directly overlook, sideways from this extension. The 45-degree point was in relation to the smaller element which was omitted from the previous committee report because the applicant clarified they're not applying for it. It's very, very difficult to substantiate a reason for refusal on amenity impacts for a single-storey rear extension unless it's stupidly high, because permitted development allows you to put up a fence at 2 metres along your boundary, and therefore the difference between a fence and the height of a single-storey extension is generally not very much, and it's very difficult to substantiate a reason for, unless it's using up the whole garden or something, or super close to the boundary. And as you can see, it's actually set in, obviously, that other single-storey bit there, but that's not what's being applied for. I hope that helps.
Councillor Raby.
It's really just to acknowledge that it's complicated for the public to understand the limitations of what we're deciding here. Officers spend years of training and are professionals. For us to stand on this committee, we have to go through multiple training sessions, and often we get caught out on some of the specifics. And I think for people who've written in to object or have taken the time to come in to just acknowledge that for them, this doesn't feel fair and it feels bureaucratic. And I just wanted to acknowledge that. However, within the confines of what we're deciding, it is about an extension, and that must be frustrating for the public. However, I have to base it on the planning that's before me, and so I will be voting based on the tight parameters. But I just wanted to acknowledge there are people watching at home, people have taken the time to come out and speak, to acknowledge that must be very frustrating how things interact, and often don't seem to make sense to a layperson.
Thank you very much. Any other member wishing to speak on this particular item? Councillor Croker, thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Sorry, there's rather a lot of echo. Try that. Right. Closer. So I just find it really disconcerting to have so much echo on it. So clearly, I think the garden reduction is not acceptable. Just based on looking at Google Earth, this would be one of the smaller back gardens going along there, if not the smallest in that immediate area. So I'm not happy with that. The second point, though, I'd like to raise is the question of surface water flooding. Interestingly, if you look at the government's flood map for planning, it shows number 82 as being underwater, which maybe it can be guarded against, but from recollection, it wasn't actually mentioned in the report, and I wondered whether the officer might have any comments on that.
So I mean, correct, yes, it hasn't been, but this is a householder planning application for an extension. We do have regard to flooding impact, etc. When, there's an obvious impact that would arise from it, but the site is already built up. It is hard surfaced already, and in any case, when the development comes to, going through the motions of building control, they will be obliged to adhere to, I can't remember what part of the building regulations it is, but in terms of making sure that surface water is dealt with appropriately.
Any other comments? No? Okay, then I will go to the vote, and the recommendation is to approve planning permission subject to appropriate conditions. All those in favour, please show. Okay. All those against? Any abstentions? No.
Okay, so it was 10 for, 2 against and no abstentions.
Okay, therefore the recommendation to approve plan permission subject conditions as put forward by the officers has been approved. Thank you very much. Members of the public, you are free to leave, unless of course you're here for the next item. A point here. We're moving on to item number 8. This will start before 8 o'clock. At the end of this item, I'll ask if you would to continue. I think as we only have one left, I think we should continue, but I will ask for a vote on whether you wish to continue after this particular item. So item 8 is a TPO 1620 land on the crescent to the east of the rear of numbers 45, 47, 49 and 51 Hillside, Horsham. Please could the officer make the presentation to committee. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. The proposal before members tonight seeks confirmation of a tree preservation order on the land on the crescent to the east of the rear of numbers 45, 47, 49, 51 Hillside, Horsham. The proposed order seeks to protect a group of 10 trees comprising 4 sycamores, 2 cedars, 2 ash, 1 yew and 1 hawthorn. Officers consider that the trees make a significant collective contribution to the local amenity and that it remains expedient to protect them following recent vegetation clearance and works within the vicinity and concerns regarding their future retention. Here are some views of the group of trees when viewed from the south and from the pedestrian link between numbers 53 and 55 Hillside. And again here from Hillside and from the southern section of the crescent. Officers recommend that the request for the TPO be confirmed as served as per section 7.1 of the officer report. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I'd like to invite the first speaker, Colin Seacombe. Please, and you have 3 minutes.
I have neighbours, so I believe I'm permitted to read.
Yeah, I will come to that in a moment. You're reading a statement on behalf of Terry Healy.
Any objection to me doing that one first?
Whichever one you want to do first. Okay, but with this statement, once you finish the statement, then that's the end of the time on that statement. Okay. Then you get your 3 minutes. Yes.
Right, this is on behalf of 49 Hillside, who are unfortunately away. I'll read it verbatim. This objection relates to the land to the east of the rear of the gardens of numbers 45, 47, 49 and 51. Thank you for the opportunity to give Cole Seckham to speak on our behalf regarding the temporary TPO on the group of trees and in particular sycamore tree at the rear of 49 Hillside. We want to make it clear that at the outset we appreciate the importance of trees and understand why the council has a responsibility to consider whether these trees/tree should be protected at this level. We have lived at our property for more than 45 years and have developed a genuine appreciation for trees, plants, and the importance of creating a pleasant and natural environment through gardening and care for the environment. Our intention has never been simply to remove a tree, but has been to improve the whole area and create a lovely, peaceful garden that we can enjoy and maintain for the future. This strip of land is being returned to the original garden ownership, and it was hoped to be used for a shed and a potting shed, which would allow us to properly establish and maintain the garden. Trees would have been planted on the perimeter to soften the impact of any fencing. The position of the ash tree at 47, the sycamore at 52, and this sycamore at 49 combine a very extensive multiple root system into our strip of land and very significantly restrict what can be realistically done with the land. This is very disheartening. A permanent TPO would therefore have a direct and substantial impact on plans that I have been working towards for some time. In fact, since the 1990s, I've been trying to get CrowdAce to sell the land back to the group of houses affected. This has only been achieved to be now possible, thwarted by the council. However, it makes sense to try and find a reasonable and constructive solution rather than requesting the trees be removed. The unmade road edges of the crescent are quite unruly, with brambles, weeds and seedlings sporadically growing and could be aesthetically greatly improved. Therefore, we propose that if the sycamore at the rear of 49 is allowed to be replaced with a number of trees sensibly spaced to add to that natural environment and become a better addition to the crescent than an eventually large and potentially troublesome sycamore, which will potentially grow to 30 metres high. These replacements could be of a type such as possibly hawthorn, malus, bay tree, and would greatly be more interesting than the sycamore. We believe this offers a genuine compromise. The existing sycamore at 49 can be properly assessed under the temporary protection, but if permanent protection is not considered justified, its removal can be accompanied by a meaningful replacement planting scheme. The group of trees on a TPO could be treated the same. The ash at 47 is a liability and is swamping an evergreen tree on the land. The sycamore at 51 needs extensive pruning and is leaning. These are all trees that have not been cared for nor maintained. We hope the committee will consider that a proportionate solution can be found that protects the wider environment while also allowing us to achieve our plans and our aims. We thank the committee for their time and consideration. Teresa and Terry Healy.
Thank you. You now have 3 minutes.
On that, perfect. Firstly, we support good tree maintenance, etc. We own woodlands in the parish and we've planted 400 trees in the past 18 months. So we're not against protecting trees, that's for sure. The objective of a TPO is to protect the local amenity. And these must have, and as you know, special landscape characteristics, habit value, heritage settings, etc. So that their loss would materially reduce the quality of the local environment for the public. And that's a requirement that must be met today. All these trees are down a private road. The first picture that you showed up there was actually taken from the private road, so not from a public viewpoint. And the fact that they're down a private road makes the local amenity objective requirement significantly higher for trees to have to meet that special character. I actually question whether the sporadic mismatch of common trees down this private road can adequately satisfy the requirement for the public amenity. 8 out of the 10, and I think it's only 9 trees, are not visible from the public view. It's only that one cedar that you can see from the public view. None of these trees have significant characters or any special characteristics. As a neighbour said, enhanced and proper landscaping would offer a far better wildlife corridor and better viewing, breeding areas, and a taller mix of trees will ensure continued privacy. The ash tree, which is in our rear garden, is not one tree, but it's not 2 trees, but it's only one. We've inspected that. The offshoots are all springing out at angles and prevent fencing and also prevent the use of private gardens. It's also showing signs of ash dieback, which the planning officer actually mentioned earlier. An unhealthy tree may not necessarily meet the grounds for protection. It's multi-stemmed, it's growing out in wide angles. It's also dangerous because it's co-dominant. That impacts its structural stability. That presents a danger to anyone, children playing on the road, as well as anything in the private gardens that it overhangs. That entire tree was in our boundary and its largest branch is splinting out sideways over our existing outbuildings. TPO would devalue the value of our property and would act as a deterrent to future buyers, devaluing our asset. The objective of a public amenity cannot be such a low bar. The more appropriate public amenities allow the proper landscaping for the benefit of the community and the residents. I don't think the requirements to allow a TPO should be considered satisfied here without meeting that at least a high bar of public amenity. The land that the trees are on have been used as a dumping ground for building materials in as recently as the last few weeks because it hasn't been cared for and it can't be landscaped by the residents at the moment. And I think the outcome that everybody wants is that a properly planted and maintained landscape would be significant improvement over the current unruly trees.
Thank you very much. I'll now invite Claire Riley, and you have 3 minutes.
Good evening. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to speak. I'm here today on behalf of all of my neighbours to support the TPO down the Crescent. This is not simply a collection of trees. It is an established living environment that provides significant amenity, ecological and environmental value to the local community. The trees, a mixed hedgerow, provide a habitat for a remarkable variety of wildlife. We have bats, slowworms, hedgehogs, foxes, voles, wood mice and newts, as well as a huge variety of nesting birds. It also provides an important habitat for essential pollinators. The trees protect and shade the hedgerow, which is itself particularly valuable. It contains wildflowers such as green alkanet and ragged robin, elderflower and blackberry bushes, alongside a mixture of ash, maple, yew and holly trees. The fact that it is a mixed established hedgerow is important. It is not something that has appeared recently. It represents a long-standing feature of the landscape and has developed into an ecosystem over many years. There is also a very real amenity value for local residents. The trees can be seen from halfway down the Crescent and hillside. They soften what would otherwise be an increasingly built-up landscape of houses and roofs. They provide a much more pleasant natural outlook and help maintain a sense of openness and greenery. They also provide a sound-reducing benefit from traffic on the A24. While the trees obviously cannot eliminate traffic noise, they create a natural buffer and help to soften both the visual and environmental impact of the road. This area is also regularly used by local people, particularly dog walkers, excuse me, who walk along hillside and down the Crescent in a loop using the Twitton and passing these trees. It is a calming natural environment that people actively use and value. That is amenity value in a very real sense. Finally, I think we should consider the wider environmental picture, especially given all the new houses that are being built today. The government's sustainable farming incentive recognises the importance of nature-friendly measures, such as tree planting and establishing and maintaining hedgerows, partly because they can help address pollution and support biodiversity. It seems entirely contradictory to encourage the creation of habitats like these while allowing established habitats that are already providing those benefits to be lost. Once these trees and this hedgerow are removed, the wildlife habitat, visual screening, noise buffering and natural character they provide cannot simply be replaced overnight. I therefore respectfully ask the Council to recognise the amenity, environmental and ecological value of this established landscape and to support the protection of these trees and hedgerow. Many thanks.
Thank you very much. Invite the officer to come back on any points that were raised.
I think the tree officer has done a full assessment of the trees and considers them worthy of a tree preservation order, which is detailed within the report. Thank you.
Okay, any member wishing to comment on this? No? Okay, therefore we'll go to the... apologies. Councillor Trollope, yes.
I just note that the objector, Mr. Sircom, he mentioned that there were improvements that he would effect. Would the officers be able to comment on what he said in terms of his improvements and whether or not that could lead to a deferral to allow a more formal report to come forward, or whether or not his statements don't have enough merit for that? Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Trollope. A tree preservation order can either protect the trees or it doesn't protect the trees. A tree preservation order, if not in place, can't say, oh, if they chop them down, we can make them plant other things. That's not kind of how the system works. So, you know, it can protect them. What it also does, though, if you protect the trees and then there's an evidence base that they're dying or there's significant issues with them, you know, they can apply to have the tree removed, and at that point it might be then you can require a replacement. You can't instigate that process without a tree tree preservation order in place. And in any event, the tree officer does consider that they are worthy of protection as they are. Thank you.
Okay. Anyone else like to comment? Okay. Therefore, I go to the vote, and the recommendation is to confirm tree preservation order 1620 as served. All those in favour, please show. Get my hand down.
It's unanimous.
Thank you very much. Therefore, the recommendation has been approved. Before we progress to the last item on the agenda, just move to a vote. Right, I've been advised I don't need to.
Not yet.
Not yet. Maybe my watch is fast.
Well, actually, no, not at all, because if you start this,
Okay, I stand corrected. So moving on to item number 9, DC 260830, Park House, North Street, Horsham. Please could the officer present to committee? Thank you for reminding me.
Thank you, Chair. This proposal before members. Oh, that's the last one. Sorry. It's been a long night. Thank you, Chair. The application relates to an existing basement level window within a partially concealed light well on the rear elevation of Park House, which is a Grade 2 star listed building on North Street, currently occupied as a multi-let office accommodation. The site is located within the built-up area of Horsham and lies in a mixed-use setting with nearby listed buildings, including Horsham Park Barn, stables, and the granary. Listed building consent is sought to replace an existing basement level timber sash window and secondary glazing on the rear elevation with a fixed aluminium ventilation louver within the existing opening. The proposal would retain the surrounding historic fabric and improve basement ventilation, helping to prevent damp-related deterioration and support the long-term conservation of the listed building. The existing elevations are shown on the slide here. And the proposed louver would be sited beneath the existing staircase. The slide here also illustrates the existing and proposed detailed sections. And finally, this slide here illustrates the real-world location and appearance of the rear of the building. As members will note, the position of the window is more or less wholly obscured by the existing staircase to the rear of the building. Officers therefore recommend that the application is approved in accordance with the suggested conditions at 7.1 of the committee report. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We have no public speakers, and therefore I open this up to debate by the committee. Any comments? Okay, we'll go straight to the vote then, and the recommendation is to approve planning permission subject to appropriate conditions. All those in favour, please show.
It's unanimous. Thank you.
For the recommendation to approve planning permission subject to appropriate conditions has been approved. Urgent business? No urgent business, you'll be pleased to know. So finally, I'd like to thank the officers for their presentations and guidance and involvement this evening, as well as the members and for your contribution, and wish you all a safe journey home. And at 2004, thank you, Councillor Lambert. 2004, I bring this meeting, the Planning Committee, to a close. Thank you.
2005.